So again, my name is Brent Hansen. I'm our federal CTO here at Tallis, and I'll tell you to start off, I think the second best spot to present is right before break, and the first one is at the end of the day before happy hour. So I'll kick us off here before our break, and I think from a question and answer standpoint, I'll save those for after the session because there is a break, and you can certainly reach us back at our table in the back far right corner. So in terms of Tallis, what we provide is a data-centric approach and a platform that can enable you to encrypt data no matter where that data goes, where it resides, whether it's on-premise, whether it's in a hybrid cloud, or whether you're crowdsourcing information that needs to be shared amongst multiple agencies to make very smart decisions and to react quicker than we've ever been able to before. Now, in terms of how we relate to CDM, so when you look at Phase 1 and Phase 2, and you're collecting a lot of DNA or blueprinting of the network, that's a lot of sensitive information. And when you look back at what we've already been able to contribute to CDM phases is essentially going back and working with DHS and integrators and other agencies to encrypt that valuable data that was actually collected in Phase 1 and Phase 2. Now, looking towards defend, it is all about the data. And I can tell you firsthand, I'm more of a data expert. I'm a data geek rather than a security person. But it's all around the data and all around the different mechanics and controls of how you can lock down your data so it's truly at a need-to-know basis, but also can put you in a proactive stance in terms of, I know I'm protecting my data, but give me some metrics into how effectively I am doing that. So when it comes to defend and it comes to data, we certainly have a data-centric approach, and I'm going to walk you through a couple guidance situations in a decision tree that oftentimes when you're told to go out and encrypt everything, and this is not something that's new, before being federally focused, I straddled the commercial side and been on many different journeys, as you would call it, when customers want to get to an encrypt everything type of state, and you're working with CISOs and chief data architects to essentially understand where is the data, how it's classified, and how do we get to a posture that we satisfy our board of directors for this encrypt everything strategy. So before I get started, and I heard there's a couple of jokes. I don't have a bad joke or a good joke, but I have a couple of statistics for you. And if you've heard me present, I always like to throw a couple numbers out there, and I guarantee no one will get these right, but you can give it a good try. I always say it's a good answer, but it's not the right answer. So from a statistical standpoint, anybody have any good guesses on what 19, 2, and 4 might perhaps represent? Okay, you're all wrong. I'm just kidding. What that represents is a breakout time. So this article came out, I think, in April of 2019, and it certainly caught my eye because I'm not surprised by the amount of time it takes for one of these nation states to break inside your network, and what this represents is in the event Russia breaks into your network, you've got 19 minutes to react, or the breakout time is they will already have gone on to a second node somewhere in your network. You have 2 hours for North Koreans and 4 hours for China. So the only thing surprising about this is really the order. I was surprised that China wasn't number one. But again, what this is just food for thought in terms of people will get through the network. Things will get through the network. And we've got a defense in-depth approach of products, processes, people, best practices, tribal knowledge, and amongst all these things that we've learned up until where we are today, people will still be inside the network. And the absolute most effective thing that you can do, and everyone agrees with this, is to encrypt your data. And to encrypt your data is by far the most important control you can provide, but encryption is really only as strong as how you manage the keys. And so what we've always provided is additional capabilities that is really around access control and how you govern the encryption itself. So those are my statistics for you. Now, I'm sure every vendor that maybe perhaps comes to a lunch and learn or whatever you may call these kind of informational of, hey, we support CDM, okay, vendor, come in and talk to us. So I will tell you, when it relates to data, and we've got some assets out at our table, but oftentimes it is your responsibility to go through the Excel spreadsheet and check off everything that you're accomplishing as far as requirements. So when it comes to data, we've done the work for you. 853, right? It's really upon us to do the hard work for you to ensure that when you're trying to accomplish these requirements, that we can tell you exactly what we satisfy, and you're able to accommodate that into your plan and strategy. So in terms of our data security platform, again, like I said, I'm a data guy first before security. And so I grew up in data management, data architecture, and then governance, and now encryption. And I will tell you that one of the most favorite people I like to sit down and talk to outside of the security and cloud organization is the chief data officer, chief data architect. They understand the life cycle of data. And what I will tell you is that in the present time, it's cloud first, no matter what, and you've got software as a service, infrastructure, platform as a service, object storage. You've got a lot of different considerations to manage your next generation data, but also ensuring that you are protecting all data in the review mirror that is considered legacy. And so I always like to talk about what are the architectural considerations, and what something looked like yesterday looks a little bit different today because of containerization and microservices, but in all intents and purposes, you have a user logs into an application. That application typically writes to a database. That database, I assure you, is sitting on an operating system, and that operating system is mounting storage, right? So where in this stack can you apply the most effective encryption? And what I find oftentimes is when speaking to security or data practitioners is, what are all the options, and where is the best way to apply encryption? There is no product out there that you can buy that you just plug into the network and all of a sudden you're absolutely secure from anyone who are able to thwart your network. So when I go through these, I talk about responsibility considerations, and of course a lot of this talks about phase 1 and phase 2 with CDM around in an application, how do you authenticate? What are ways to apply multi-factor authentication? But when I start digging down a little further, it's who owns the application, who owns the database, who owns the system, how is that data backed up? Are we doing it on-premise? Are we using a third party? Are we now pushing it to cloud? Because no matter where that data resides, whether it's in practice or whether it's an archive or backup form, that's invaluable to someone, depending on what their aspirations are. And then, of course, how is data classified and security options available? And I've sat with customers on the commercial side, state and local and federal side, where oftentimes they want to go out and do the data classification first. And those are very resource-intensive projects. And what I think and what I've experienced is if you would start from the data first and work outward versus we've always started with a firewall and worked inward, and data is the last frontier of where we are applying. Look at just the evolution of the CDM process. It's defend, and it's all about the data, right? In the event, all of these security layers, in the event there's a vulnerability, right? We have to go to the data, and we have to enable data to defend itself, and we have to know when it's under attack. And so when you look at the security considerations of each one of those in terms of credential management, you think about risk mitigation, you think about all the different people that have administrative access in the stack, whether they're an application administrator, a data owner, database owner, infrastructure, sysadmin, whoever they may be. And oftentimes, again, if you look at it from a data aspect, you could say, I'm in a Hadoop or a big data environment or relational database, and I can say, gosh, how could I be vulnerable all the way up the stack, and then, of course, sideways from an administrative standpoint. And I'll tell you that what you find is where you apply the security, higher in the stack you apply it. If you were to do application-level encryption at the inception of where data is originally collected and you push it downstream in an encrypted state, everything downstream, there's no gaps. Everything downstream benefits the higher in the stack that you apply your security. What I'll also tell you is that the higher in the stack you apply security, you're also increasing the complexity of what it takes to implement. If application-level encryption is the utopia of data security, then why haven't we already accomplished it? Why isn't there a quick appliance that you plug in on the network that sits in front of all your applications and does it for you? Because it's very difficult. And what represents an application is also very different today than it was before with digital transformation, the modernization, containers, microservices. The way we develop applications is 90% faster than we did 5 years ago. But I'll tell you that all of these disruptive technologies that advance us from an innovative standpoint weren't essentially all of us sitting in a room thinking of how to containerize applications, and then one of us raise our hand and say, let's not forget to make it the most secure and disruptive, innovative technology ever created, right? Security is always retrofitted. It's always last. And I can tell you from my experience at Tallis and my experience just as a data expert that when you look at this stack, there's a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot of politics. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made on where you can apply that layer of protection. And so I finally came up with just a decision tree that I actually presented this in a Shark Tank for one of our customers in an exercise a few months ago. And again, it's when you're talking to people with large responsibilities around data security, also from an infrastructure standpoint, it's how do I kill the bunny with these big fangs and these big teeth? Like, how do I encrypt everything? I don't even know what everything might represent. Is it IoT devices? Is it mobile? Is it what's in the cloud? And what I will tell you is that if you create a decision tree, and oftentimes I equate this to in infrastructure, if someone were to come to you and say, I need some virtual environment spun up, you would probably have a template that asks these 5 questions. What operating system? How much storage? How much processing power do you need, right? And you would come on our workflow. This is, the deliverable I have to you. But what if you could apply that concept or that, quick interview process to your security when you're trying to encrypt everything and trying to understand where at the best level can I most effectively apply encryption or tokenization? Would this make it easier for you? And the conversations I've had since I built this, have been very positive in terms of help me. And oftentimes as a security professional, we'll sit in a room, we'll talk about everything we're able to accomplish and how we can very seamlessly fit into their environment. Then they will say, okay, great, I'm a believer. Now enable me or empower me to go back inside my agency and make them a believer. Because I'm sold, but I don't have any budget. So it is a trade-off, right, where you have to empower to sell internally against different politics, different vendors, different constituents in a security environment. So this decision tree is really taking you from an application layer and asking questions just based on our data-centric approaches of, hey, is this an application that you have access to source code? If it is, have you considered using format-preserving encryption? You don't have to make any changes downstream to the database schema. All your ETL jobs, your BI, referential integrity, all of that remains in contact. If not, then can you tokenize? Can that application make a REST API call? If you can tokenize it, then you talk about data masking, data obfuscation, different ways to reveal data that still make it very invaluable to the people that use it, but just not in the context of posting up, false social security numbers in a customer service application. And if not, is it a database that runs on Linux, Unix, Windows? Is it on cloud? Is it on-premise? Is it hybrid cloud? And going through this type of decision tree, and you can apply this to any security out there. And what this constitutes is a consistent approach to looking at your data and understanding where you can approach to encryption, whether that's tokenization, whether it's application-level encryption, whether it's file encryption with access control, whether you have to do volume encryption, or whether you've got self-encrypting drives, all of your data centers. So again, feel free to stop by and ask questions. But this decision tree, I think, in the few times that I've used this in conversation since I created it just about 6 weeks ago, is beneficial because you can go back inside and ask these very specific questions that have very specific answers that you can then start to build a matrix or a pie chart of, if we were to provide this level of security at this layer in these applications, you can equate it to some sort of metrics of effectiveness. So in closing, and again, I want to keep us on track in terms of timing, it's all about defense in depth and where can you apply your controls. And this is probably one of the oldest slides we have at Tallis since I've been on board for about 6.5 years, but it still is it's all about this layered defense in depth. And again, you've got firewall and malware detection. You have all DLP, database access monitoring, and in the event someone gets all the way through each one of those and circumvents it or finds a vulnerability, you have to enable your data to defend itself. And I will tell you, the most prudent way to do that is to encrypt it with access control and to provide metrics or optics into how effective that is. So that if you are protecting your data and it represents 5,000 systems, how valuable would it be to say, gosh, in the last 90 days, we've implemented or constituted this decision tree approach to how we protect our data and defend, and that we've had 19 attempts or intent of compromise activities that in the event one of them would have happened, could have compromised a mission or compromised this or that. And so having those type of metrics into how effective your approach is oftentimes the most difficult thing you can do. So when you look at a firewall, you can say in the last 24 hours we've had 22 million attempts to infiltrate. You have to block every single one. The bad guy has to get lucky once. But in the event they're lucky once and they're inside the network, the most effective thing you can do is to encrypt that data, but also have insights that it may be perhaps under attack, or there may be suspicious user behavior patterns of people with root access or administrative credentials that in the event they're insider threat or their credentials have been compromised, that they can't be used against you. So let your data defend itself. Let your administrators, do their responsibilities. And, again, as it relates to defend, it is all about the data, and we're all about enabling you and empowering you to make the appropriate decisions and direct resources and product where it makes sense so that you can continue to increase your security posture. So with that, I believe it's break time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.